Hello, all, and welcome back to another episode of TV and Us, a conversation show about the TV series we just can't stop talking about. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And each season, we focus on a different show, reviewing it episode by episode, and we invite you to watch along with us. Right now, we're reviewing The Bear Season 2, and today we are on episode 2, titled Pasta. If you haven't watched it yet, this is your spoiler alert. Please check it out before continuing to listen to the rest of this episode. And we will dive right in with an IMDb summary from Sarah.
When renovations for the opening of The Bear continue, Fack and Richie argue over how to paint the walls, and Nat must intervene.
Oh, interesting. It indexed a little bit more closely on that whole set of shenanigans.
Yeah. It's an interesting choice.
Yes, very much so. But made for a lot of great moments in this episode, so makes sense to me. All right, let's start off with our episode titles of choice for episode 2. What was yours?
Well, in the spirit of the IMDb summary, mine is Alliance.
Nice. Oh, it's so good. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that trio, I'm sure we will talk more about. Just good times.
Yep.
My episode title of choice is It's Something.
Mm-hmm. Indeed it is.
Mm-hmm. Which can be applied to many of the things that are revealed in this episode. Okay, let's dive right in. Tell me your thoughts about episode 2.
Yeah, this is another one of those really fun episodes where everybody is kind of broken into pairs or trios. I mean, I guess the group with Fack and Richie, I guess, would be 4 if you include Nat in that. But anyway, everyone's broken into their own little groups and is going through their own set of circumstances that all relate back to the bear, and everybody is handling it differently, going through different things, and we get to see all of these characters interacting with each other, but also interacting with some new situations that we haven't seen before. And so it's just fascinating to see how who these characters are is constantly expanding as we're just like peeling back these layers and learning more about each of them and seeing where are they comfortable, where are they uncomfortable, how do they respond in these kind of new stressful situations. It's fascinating to see what this show has cooked up for each of them. And then it's also cool to see some of the seeds that are being planted in the early part of this season that are going to really pay off later in the season. So all around, another great time with this episode. Just enjoying hanging out with these characters some more.
Mm-hmm. This was for sure a seed planting episode. And I feel like the second episode of a season, this is kind of its job too, which is to like push us out onto these different pathways for following the different thread lines of these character arcs. And it really feels like episode 1 was kind of laying foundations, establishing the new vibe, the new energy, the transition into this new phase for this crew. And this episode, there's a lot of things that either develop between some of those little smaller groups that we get, or we get to see some of our smaller groups like Tina and Ibra kind of start a whole new chapter for their growth. And I'm so intrigued to see how the show continues to water some of these seeds. There's a whole thing with Carmy and Claire that I feel like is setting up to be a pretty big dramatic element of this season. And I feel like we learned so much about Carmy in season 1, but I feel like there's so much more layers of him that are going to get peeled back. And Claire is very much going to be a vehicle for us to just get to know Carmy more as a character and some of the choices he makes in that final scene with the numbers that he gives out that are clearly probably going to be wrong and not his actual number, which is just so fascinating to unpack. So I feel like there's a lot there. And then we learned so much about Sid too, like just her background, her family dynamics. I feel like throughout season 1, the presence or awareness of her father was constantly kind of in the backdrop. And I mean, it's one of the key details we learn about her when we're introduced to her as a character. But we finally get to like meet her father and see some of the tensions that she's facing with wanting to pursue her dreams, but then feeling like she has to defend and justify them to the people she cares about, which I feel like is relatable for all of us in some capacity. So once again, I'm just like, how does one 30-minute episode somehow accomplish and cover so many things? It's very efficient, and I feel like it gives us like a forward sense of propulsion to this season. So this was a really strong follow up to episode one, laying the foundation, and episode two, we're chucking all the seeds everywhere for us to harvest later on throughout the rest of the season.
Yeah, yeah. I'm consistently impressed at this show's ability to juggle so many characters all at the same time, and you don't feel as though you don't feel overwhelmed by the number of characters, but you also don't feel like you're missing anybody. I feel like this show is so good at balancing everybody, and we're learning about nearly all of the characters. I think the only one that we don't really see in this episode is Sweeps.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but like everybody else is featured pretty prominently, and we learn about each of them. Something new, or a truth bomb is dropped in some way. And that's crazy because there's so many characters. How did they do this and have it make sense and be entertaining and be I don't know, understandable to us? It's really impressive what they've been able to accomplish. And like you said, this is a 30-minute episode and they've managed to pull this off, which is it's quite a feat.
Yeah, it's insane. As I was sharing kind of my overview of thoughts, I was like just thinking of the next thing, that big thing that happened in this episode that felt so worthy to be mentioned. So it really packs a punch. I think that the way that this episode showcases this little mini arc, this little mini journey that's beginning for Tina and Ibra is like the perfect example of how efficient the show is, because if you look at the math, they really aren't on screen for very long, maybe a couple of minutes max. And we just cut to them occasionally. Like we've got a scene back at the restaurant, and then we cut to them briefly for honestly like a couple of shots. But the show is so efficient in using those character details, the context that they're in, two lines of dialogue. Like I think the scene where they're entering into the culinary school for the first time, they literally say one line each, and yet both of those lines convey so much about how they're feeling,
Mhm.
this new
Yeah.
start that they're beginning, kind of the kind of first day of school, new kid, and you're kind of a fish out of water. Like this uppity world of like the culinary arts isn't something that they are accustomed to, and you feel all of that based on their facial expressions, the people milling around them, and then just the two lines that they deliver in total across the two of them, and that's it. And then we cut away, and there's so many little moments like that. I'm thinking of the other one with Ibra where he's just quietly cutting his celery back at the school, and everyone else has left for the day, but he's still there, faithfully doing his work, figuring it out, trying to keep up. And just the efficiency with those short, super short little shots peppered out throughout the episode, I feel like is a whole little arc in and of itself. And it's just the perfect representation of how efficient the show is because it understands who its characters are.
Yeah, and we're able to glean so much from those shots too. So once again, this show just really respecting us as the audience to pick up on what's being unspoken here. And I think the way that their whole experiences at culinary school, I think the way that that starts is really indicative in setting all of this up. Because when Sydney offers it, Tina is so excited. She's like, yes, let's go, let's do it. And Ibra is super apprehensive and doesn't really want to go. But then he accepts, we love Ibra because he's like, yeah, I'll do it, even though I don't really want to. And so then pairing those two together when they have those completely opposite reactions, I think also helps make that more interesting to watch, and really, really highlights what both of these characters are going through. You know, we might not know the reason for Ibra's apprehension, but we don't need to know that right now. We just need to know that for some reason he's unsure about wanting to be here. And then it's also really sweet, that moment when Tina just encourages him when he's struggling and falling behind.
Yeah.
And so we get to see her growth as a character from the first season as well. So yeah, so efficient, so well done, and gives us an even greater understanding of these two characters that we have already grown to appreciate.
Mm-hmm. Ibra is slowly becoming one of my favorite characters. He cracks me
Mm-hmm.
up. You know, when Tina's like, there's a lot of Sydney's here, he's like, don't look them in the eyes.
Yeah.
Or even when Sydney's doling out and like offering and like introducing them to the school and the courses, he's like, but I already know how to do these things. I'm like, you're right.
Mm-hmm.
You do.
Yep.
He's just, but then you couple that with his willingness to stay late and work hard to ensure that he can keep up, that he can continue to learn this craft, uh, even when everybody else has left. Like, it is so indicative of like who he is as a character. And I feel like he makes for some really great moments in season one, and we learn a little bit about him, but there wasn't as much centering of him and who he is as a person throughout season one. And there's just so many other characters to focus on that I feel like we're getting to learn so much about who Ibra is too, and how he's wired and what his emotions are and how he reacts to situations in just honestly the last two episodes. So I'm excited for that. I think that's something I mentioned a lot in season one. There's so many side characters that I want to learn more things about, and I love that we're getting to see a lot more of Ibra. So
Mm-hmm.
endearing.
Yes.
He's so
Oh,
endearing.
yeah. He's wonderful.
Oh, it's so great. Okay, other big moments that we definitely need to hit on. What stands out to you?
Well, I mean, we should probably talk about the Richie, Fack, Marcus, Natalie,
Yes.
just hot mess express at at the restaurant.
I I mean, anytime you throw Fack and Richie together, I think it's going to be a grand time. But then you put Marcus in, who's such a different energy to both of them too, because I think they're both
Mm-hmm.
so loud and expressive, and they're kind of like volatile together. And Marcus is in the mix, and he's such a different energy, but also he's stirring the pot too. You know what I mean? In his own way, and I think that just made for a lot of fun. I also feel like the first episode overall, comparatively to some of the episodes that we've seen so far, was a little bit more grounded in the like emotional moments. And I love that the second episode, through the device of throwing these three together, really leaned into the like silliness that we got a lot through season one as well. So I was just pleased that we just got to hang out with the foolishness with these three, and it felt like such a nice compliment to a lot of episode one.
And I love that in the previous episode we see Fack and Richie having, you know, some like bro moments, and they're really like enjoying each other and having fun hanging out. And then in this episode, they are not getting along at all. And so I feel like that's such an indication of what their relationship just is like. You know, sometimes they
Mm-hmm.
love each other, sometimes they're at each other's throats, and it just is what it is. And those two have probably known each other their whole lives. So it also just makes sense that they would be like that. They would have that type of relationship. Uh, but I think it's so fun because you get to learn so much about all of them all at once. You know, you see Richie, who in the previous episode was
Counting
trying
to
really
10
hard. Yes, he was
before he
counting
blows up.
down. He was reading his books, you know, trying to be patient, accepting change, all of these things. And then in
Mm-hmm.
this episode, he's like, nah, screw it. I need to be in charge. I'm going to do these things, and I'm going to do it my way, or it's the highway, you know, very much like Richie mode. And then there's Fack, who is so happy and is right. Honestly, he knows what he's talking about, which is kind of the most surprising thing to me in this
Mm.
episode. uh
So good.
and he's not willing to take any of Richie's crap when he knows that he's right.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have Marcus, who is just this like
Big teddy
weird
bear.
middle ground who
Mm-hmm.
is like, okay, what is common sense? Let's do the common sense thing. And is just so calm and cool and collected and will call people out in his own like calm and peaceful way. But he is just chilling. And then you have Natalie, and we
Yes.
learn so much about her in this episode too. But my favorite thing about her is that anytime that Fack calls her, she's like, "Yes, sweetheart. Yes, sweetie." Like she's so kind and sweet to him. And then
And then with
anytime Richie
Richie.
opens his mouth, she's like, "Ah, screw this guy." And it's just so fun, those dynamics, because
Yeah.
these characters are all so different. And then you put them together, and it makes for such a good time.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, it's so fun that they're calling her mom too, because I do feel like it just further
Yeah.
emphasizes how much they are just bickering like siblings do. And I feel like anyone who's either has siblings or who has been around and spent a lot of time in families that have siblings that just like love each other so deeply, but also are unafraid to just go at it with each other. This feels very resonant. You know what I mean? Like you're like, oh, I know this dynamic. And all of the different like loyalties and alliances and all that kind of stuff that are constantly shifting is really fun. I think one of the things that I was thinking about when so many of these scenes with Richie were unfolding, and just in general, I think with Richie as a character, is that he is such a jerk, as we know. We have seen him be an asshole many a times, but there's something that's really endearing about the way that he throws his temper tantrums that are this bigger and like more dramatic version of the things that we feel in our own lives, and yet he is expressing them in the most immature way, but those feelings are rooted in something real, you know. And so when he's throwing that whole tantrum in season one where he doesn't want things to change, like yes, he's being a jerk, but we've all felt that experience of like I'm holding on to these ways of doing things before, and change is hard, you know. And so in this episode I feel like you get to see him, honestly, my theory is that he knows he's wrong, but he's just kind of digging his heels in and wanting to be defensive because it's coming out of this place of pride, this desire for control, this desire to like one up Fack in whatever way he can, and he does it in a big and immature way, but that feeling is something real. It's something human. And when that collides with Fack, who is so happy-go-lucky and willing to just stand up to him, it kind of creates this really fun and hilarious situation. But uh, she's just so fascinating because I feel like it's easy to view him as like, oh, he's immature, he's a jerk, whatever. But there's a lot of things that he feels that he doesn't know how to express in the right way, but they are grounded in things that every human being feels. So oddly, he is one of the most human characters on this show, even though he is so larger than life in many other ways.
Mm-hmm. And I think that that's really smart to make this character as complex as he is. Like, Richie is the most frustrating character to me. Like, he gets on my nerves. And there are multiple times in each episode, usually when I'm like, okay, he just needs to be punched in the face. Like, he's being the worst. And yet, I can't hate this character because there is
Yes.
something in there that is
Mm-hmm.
that you can empathize with, or there's something in there that's endearing. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that that's so smart of this show not to make him an antagonist. It
Yep.
really would have been easy to write him that way, or end up with him being that way. But I think it's a combination of the writing and then the performance that makes him someone that you still want to root for, even when he's being the worst. And he is being just terrible in this episode.
Yes.
And yet it's fun and funny. And even though you might want to punch him in the face, like, you know that there's other stuff going on. Like you said, he's
Mm-hmm.
feeling feelings and isn't quite sure what to do with those.
Mm-hmm.
And again, just so impressed with the writing of this show to make him someone that you still want to root for, even though he's being the worst. And that's a hard thing to pull off. And they pull that off very well in this episode.
Yes, yes, very much so. And I wonder if the order and the sequencing of us seeing his like more vulnerable side and understanding what he's dealing with internally in episode one helps us come into this episode with that lens versus say he was like a little bit more in the backdrop for a couple episodes and then we get this episode, we might judge him a little bit more harshly. But you know, there's that moment where they're fighting and Richie goes, well, it's my ladder. And Fact then brings a larger one, of course, because we've got to one up him
Yep.
somehow. But even in that little statement of Richie saying like it's my ladder, we can see him signaling like I feel out of control. I don't know what my purpose is. I don't know what I'm doing. This is the one thing that I feel like I can somewhat contribute to. And so that identity crisis that he has expressed in some of those more vulnerable moments in episode one helps us paint this whole scene, this whole shenanigans in a different light. And I think the juxtaposition of these two episodes coming one after the other is like a really smart choice. Because I definitely would have probably judged him a little bit more harshly and he would have gotten on my nerves more. But when he's like, this is my ladder, I'm like, oh, you need some sense of identity and this is the thing that you're clinging on to for whatever reason. And aren't we all kind of like that in our own ways? But I thought that like that ordering and that the timing of those two moments from the previous episode into this one is really smart, really smart.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a really great point, and again just shows this understanding of this character and the journey that he is on. You know, we know from the previous season that he is struggling with change. He doesn't know who he is outside of this restaurant, and now this whole thing is changing. And even in the previous episode, he says, I think you're gonna drop my ass. uh and so you can see how that vulnerability and that fear and that anxiety has turned into this wanting to be in charge ness that he has. So oh, Richie, he's
Oh,
on quite a
Richie.
journey here.
Yes, he is. The other thing I love about the Marcus Fack Richie scenes is that obviously the show is very funny, but I love that we get so much visual humor in those scenes as well. You know, just
Mm-hmm.
like the ceiling falling on Richie, Fact like in the background bringing in like a slightly larger ladder just makes for some fun variation in the
Yeah,
humor of the show. It is really great.
I really love when the ceiling falls on Richie and then like a dodgeball just drops
Yes,
from the ceiling and hits him on the head. Like,
yes, so perfectly
what?
timed too.
Why was there a dodgeball in the ceiling? What's going on? Oh, it's
Yeah,
so good.
so good. And then I love in that same scene, this is such a perfect like Fack moment because it so represents his energy and what he brings. But Fack says to Richie when they're cleaning up in that scene, he's like, well, it's not your fault. It's the molds.
Uh-huh. Oh,
It's
he's
so
so
endearing.
sweet.
He is. He really is. Okay, we should talk about Sydney and
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of like Sydney and Carmi scene I think we should talk about, and then the Sydney and her father scene that we should also talk about. Which shall we start with first? What's thoughts on either?
Either one. Where do you want to go first?
Um, let's talk about Sydney with her father because I thought was I think that's prominent to me because she's a character that the show is clearly spending a lot of time growing her character and showcasing some of these like talents and ambitions and leadership that she has over the course of all of season one. And we know that she's living with her father. We know that her father was one of the like loved the original beef shop and is one of the reasons that she even showed up here. And I just thought that like the interaction of all of those scenes that she has with her father was just so well balanced. We get the really sweet moments of them like reminiscing on and talking about the memories that they have with her mother, but then I love that the show doesn't like lean so heavily into the sentimentality and sweetness of that, because it's followed up soon after with this scene where there is a little bit of tension between them, where he's kind of, as a great parent should, like asking her about like her plans, her ability to sustain herself, all this kind of stuff. How will she make a living? And her being a younger person who has big dreams, is you can see her getting defensive about it, and you can tell that it's a sensitive topic for her. So I just loved kind of the the emotional balance of all of the scenes that unfold with her and her father. And the show's smart to not lean too heavily into one or the other, because it can be a really sweet moment and the next moment you're like, there's a little, you're rubbing up against each other a little bit. And I think you really get to see Sydney's persistence and faithfulness and commitment to this dream now that she's building with Carmi and the rest of the crew. There's a sense of fortitude and a sense of conviction that she has of like, this is what I want to do, and she's not wavering anymore, which was really amazing to see. And I feel like you also get a sense for the risks that they are all taking to make this dream come true, which we were aware of, but I think it made it feel more real in those scenes as well.
Yeah, yeah, making clear the sacrifice that they're all making. The previous episode was a lot about numbers and how are they going to do this financially, and that's still a question that we had because we know that Carmi's cardboard math is very, very bad. And so I love that we get to finally understand what this partnership actually means and what that looks like, and how much they have actually staked into this, because it's not just the stakes of if they can't get this restaurant up and running in 18 months then they're done for, but it's also they're not getting paid for 6 months
Yeah.
of this project, and that's a big deal that they're walking into and opting into. And the other part about Sydney in this episode that I really love is how they set up the reveal that her mom has passed away. And because she references mom's birthday dinner early on, then Carmi asks like, hey, is your mom cool? And
Yeah.
Sydney
She dodges.
doesn't yeah, she doesn't really know like how to respond to that. So she just kind of sidesteps it, and then at the end is when it's
Mhm.
revealed like, oh, she's no longer with them. And I loved that, and I think it also goes back to maybe some of that emotional awareness that Sydney has in understanding that, hey, maybe this isn't the time to go into this with Carmi. Like, we're here, we're cooking, we're creating, we're bonding, we're developing this deeper rapport. Uh, do I want to bring this down by referencing my mother's death? And then he might think even more of Mikey's death, and they had just taken down the locker, and like, might this derail our whole good cooking experience that we're doing right now? So I think it's once again showing how in tune Sydney is, and that willingness to like, I don't know, just read the room and go with what the room needs rather than what she needs.
Yeah, no, that's so true. That's so true, especially with Carmi too, because he is also processing through the grief that has unfolded with Mikey's death. So there's an extra layer of emotional awareness and sensitivity that she has with him as well. And I think also part of it's probably like, hey, today is literally my mother's birthday. Like, this also is an extra emotional day for me, and might not be the best headspace and heart space for me to share today. So we'll go and try the little pickled something, whatever that they were making. And she does it in such a elegant way to sidestep without like making a big deal out of it. The moment has passed, and then you're on to the next thing. So her EQ on that front is also really, really just top notch.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then we have Carmi,
Yeah.
our dude.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Okay, well, the episode ends with Carmi and Claire, and it feels like there's just this amazing like growth that we're seeing in Carmi through season one, and I feel like this is a whole new level of him learning to uh, open up in a way that feels very vulnerable for him. And the fact that he gives her a wrong number just indicates, and you see his brain like mulling it over when he's saying all the numbers of this phone number out, and he gets to the end and you see him just he gets scared, he shies away from it. And I feel like in general Carmi's journey has been, one, being vulnerable and opening up yourself to be loved and to receive love, but then two, believing himself that he's worthy of it. I think he struggles so much with that and has been on such a journey with it. And so when this person that he clearly seems to have a history with, he cares so deeply for, comes crashing into his life, I feel like he's just deer in headlights. Like, this is a lot. We were on a trajectory of growth, but man, this is a lot. I don't know if I'm ready for it. And we see him shy away from it, but I think it's going to challenge him and push him to grow in really exciting ways over the course of the season. I'm sure it will be ups and downs, a whole journey with Claire, but she feels like such a catalyst for him to exercise this new muscle of really opening himself up to the people that he really does care so deeply for. And I feel like that scene between the two of them, you can clearly see without the show having to explicitly tell you, you can see how much uh, there's chemistry, there's a connection, there's history. You can just feel it. It's palpable.
I love how that conversation is set up because at the beginning of the episode, Carmi is on the phone, and that's when he gives out his phone number. And of course, this is happening during the madness, and Fack and Richie are yelling at each other, but he's giving out the phone number. So you know his phone number now. And then at the end, he gives out that wrong number. And so I love that that like pays off. But then also, in the middle of the episode, when Carmi and Sydney are talking, and she is asking him about how did it feel when you got that call about the star, and he's taking you through all of his emotions, and he starts with panic and then dread and then having to get back to work to turn over a table, and he says that line of your brain does this thing where it bypasses joy. And I think that that is a perfect setup then for his conversation with Claire. Like, here is a potential for him to have joy, but instead of giving into that, he is feeling panic. He's probably feeling some dread. And then instead of actually like giving her his number and potentially opening himself up for this growth and this opportunity for joy and connection and all of that, he goes back to focusing on work. And like that, you know, that's what he's going to do after this. You know, he's going to go back to creating these recipes because he has to work, he has to create this restaurant. So I think all of these little things are such a good build up and setup to that entire conversation. And again, so impressed with the writing of the show that all of these other little details are working to get us to this point so that we can see the things that he's talked about actually playing out in real time and how he processes information and reacts to things.
Yes, so good. And I feel like it's such an amazing like next chapter, next phase for him from season 1, where we see, I think at the beginning of the season we see Sugar challenge him to be like, I want to like be there for you, and I want to like connect with you, but you're not letting me. Like, let me in. She's really like knocking at his door. And he finally learns to start to open up to Richie. He opens up a little bit more to Sydney. He opens up more to Sugar. And you see him growing in these areas and acknowledging his emotions and his feelings. And this feels like a whole new opportunity for him. And I think it'll be so fascinating to see the ups and downs of the emotions that he'll experience with this, but also the ways that he will make steps forward, maybe take some steps back, and then take some steps forward again. And I feel like based on the way that we've learned just a little bit, a couple minutes with Claire, she feels like someone who is emotionally available. And I think that's going to be a really fascinating contrast to Carmi in the ways that potentially she will draw him out and make space for him to really like be there to emotionally connect, because she's the one who was forward enough and clear enough to make an opportunity to get his number. Like she is clearly expressing
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, I'm intrigued by you. I want to spend more time with you. She's the one that takes that first step, you know? And so just the emotional groundedness of her, and then her availability, I think will be a really fascinating contrast slash opportunity for Carmi to also just take the dive in with her. But I think it'll definitely be, I think, a up and down, a volatile journey for us to get there. But I think it'll be really great for Carmi. You're just rooting for him. You're like, Carmi, do like just like you are so deserving of this love and this connection. And he self-sabotages it himself before anything can go wrong. And that is such a defense mechanism that we all do in some way or another. So I get it. I get why he makes that decision, but we just want more for him as the viewers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we want good things for you, Carmi. Just open yourself up to love, buddy. You can do it.
Right? And I think what's also really fun is he's not a like big smiler, you know, the way that other characters on the show are. He's often very serious and uh all about work, and he's not super expressive in his facial expressions the way that some of the other characters are. But in that scene with Claire, one, I love that it's filmed with literally just back and forth close-ups
Mm-hmm.
very close to both of their faces, because it's kind of this immersive experience of when you just are like excited and intrigued and fascinated by someone, you just, the rest of the world fades away and you're just like locked in on them. And I feel like that captured it really well. We never really get a super wide shot once they start talking. But then two, I feel like you get to see him just like have his little giddy smile and that joy that is starting to come, that he then squashes like you mentioned. But we get to see this like warmth and this joy in him that I feel like I was like, oh my gosh, like we've never seen this side of him, because he's so on top of things and so much in work mode and so serious most of the time, that those little smiles that we get from him feel new for this character, for us as the viewers.
Yeah, it's a whole new Carmi. If he just will
Just yes.
give the girl his actual phone number.
Right. You can
It's
do it,
so
buddy. We
simple.
want good things for you. Yeah. Yeah. Uh okay. Anything else we want to talk about in this episode before we give out some awards?
Um, can we? Okay, I would just like to acknowledge two clothing choices in this episode.
Okay.
Um, on Sydney's sweater, she has Sid written on it in like a green thread or something. And I
Oh.
thought that that was really funny on like her sleeve. Um, and I just thought that that was really funny. And I have questions about why she has Sid on her shirt. Um, and then the other clothing choice is that Fax shirt says extreme fitness on it. And I just really loved that choice. It's so good.
I did not notice that. That's so funny.
Yes.
Yeah, props to the costume design team for feeding us some little fun tidbits uh,
Hmm.
with their clothing. That's so fun.
Yeah.
Okay. My one last little thing is that I love that Sid and Carmi call their little, like work sesh. They call it like a menu jam. Do you want to jam on the menu? And I'm like, that makes it sound so much more
Mm-hmm.
fun. How can I use this in
Right?
my daily life? Yeah, we're just gonna jam on chopping some veggies.
Yeah, yeah. So like the next time that you're hanging out with a friend and like want to like get dinner or whatever, that can be what that is. A
Right.
menu jam.
Yes. Love it. Okay, let's give out some awards, shall we? First category is Top Chef. Who is getting this award and why?
I'm going to give this to Marcus for placing the anonymous call to the mold guy.
That's so great. That is a good one. Yeah, that reveal is really fun because it would be fact, but of course it is Marcus. Like just you're like, this makes sense. This is right.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
also,
I
you know,
love.
it's because he just genuinely cares too. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, yeah. And he doesn't really have like a dog in this fight, you know?
Right.
And Richie's solution was to do it himself. Fact's solution was to call in Natalie to handle
Yeah.
it. And Marcus is like, no, I'm just going to handle it. I know what needs to be done. So let's do it. And so, way to go, Marcus.
Uh-huh. My choice for Top Chef is to Sugar for sticking it to Richie and telling him to move the effing lockers.
Yes. Ugh, so satisfying.
She's like one of the few characters that can like really put him in his place, and it's really satisfying to watch. I love it. Okay, next category is Achievement in Chaos. What is getting this award this week?
Yeah, I'm just going to give it to Richie just for who he is as a person.
Just because Richie.
Just because he's Richie. Yes.
That is so great. My choice for this award is I'm giving it to Carmi's heart rate during his entire conversation with Claire.
Yes. Yep. Out of control, off the charts.
Nothing like seeing an ex-fling in the middle of your normal errands that you're running to just throw you totally off balance.
Honestly, though, he's in the middle of a recipe. He needed one ingredient and goes to the store and then runs into Claire. Oh
Yeah.
man.
Yeah. You see it, you see his brain just freaking out too. Just like, oh my God. Oh my God. It's her. It's her. Okay. Spiciest line.
I am going to give this to Fack when he whispers to Richie, move him. After Sugar tells Richie to move the lockers.
That is so great. Oh, good choice. Good choice. Especially the whispering. It's really much more menacing. Yes.
Absolutely.
My choice for this award is to Sugar for roasting herself when she says, sometimes I look like February. And I loved that.
So good. But also, like, you know what that means?
Yes.
Which is just great.
Yeah.
What a good descriptor.
So good. Okay. Looking ahead, what are you excited to see as this season continues to unfold?
Yeah, there's a little detail in this second episode that is setting up something in the season finale that I didn't catch the first time around. So I'm really excited for that payoff that's going to come later in the season.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I'm just excited to be going through this season episode by episode and we get to talk about it because there's so many really good moments throughout this season and a lot happens. So I'm just excited that we get to go through it together. This is going to be a blast.
Yes. Now I'm racking my brain for what this detail could be. And I'm like, do I even remember this detail? Do you think it's small enough that I would totally miss it?
I missed it the first time. Like I didn't place any significance on it the first time.
Okay.
All right. There's that.
Fair enough.
Hey, Jen, guess what? We get to find out in honestly not very long. So
yes,
it's a pretty
right?
season. So you will find out soon enough.
Very soon. Yes. Yes, indeed. I mentioned this earlier, but I'm excited to see the Claire unfolding of this whole new person, this whole new character for Carmi, and the significance that she might play in this season. There's a whole little detail around Sugar's pregnancy that got revealed in this episode, and yeah, so she seems. I think this is going to set up a later episode where she's going to that's going to get out somehow because they made a whole big deal about her saying, I haven't even told them about this yet. So I'm sure there's some implications and some things that will unfold from there, I would assume. And then I'm just so invested in Tina and Ibra's culinary journey. I'm so excited to see more of them. They're just a fun pairing together too because their personalities are so different. But they're such a comfort level that they have with each other that I'm just excited to see more of them two together. So those are my three little things. Three big things,
Those
honestly.
are yeah, they're big things, and they're good things too.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we'll see. We will see what happens with all of these characters.
Yeah. The show is just chucking the seeds everywhere. And I'm like, we could water so many of them. Which one will we really get to follow in the next episode? It'll be fun. We shall see. All right. Well, this was our review and discussion of episode 2. You can find it available to stream on Hulu. Thank you for listening to today's episode of TV and Us. Our name sums it up. We're big fans of TV and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories, so everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad you hung out with us today as we continued our journey through The Bear Season 2. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune to your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review, letting us know your thoughts about episode 2. You can connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at TBNSPod, or you can email us at tbnspod@gmail.com. We will be back very soon with the next episode of this season. We'll be covering episode 3. We hope you have an amazing week, and we'll see you again real soon.